Welcome to Decoder Talks Brazil, the channel that tears apart the lies of the Brazilian establishment, unafraid of censorship. Here, the truth hits like a punch to the gut of the mainstream media. I'm Enrick Toledo, and today's topic is, believe it or not, a win for Lula's chaotic government. Pequena is about to get cheaper. Remember the 2022 campaign promise? Barbecue is coming back to the Brazilian table. That's right. But hold on, before we start celebrating, let's take a look at this circus. The containers of meat that were stuck are going back to Brazilian butcher shops. Why? Because Americans aren't going to pay 50% more for Brazilian beef. It's as simple as that. Before I finish the joke, I need to talk about the militant media's theater. CNN Brazil, or rather, National Null Communication, keeps leading the way in ideological journalism, and the eternal Mortadela Lima, now at Globo News, still has that leftist slant that reeks of activism. Next to her is Camila Bomfim, who seems to live in a parallel world where awkwardness on live TV is the same as impartiality. These journalists pretend to be neutral, but what they really deliver is a grotesque display of biased narratives, blunders, and misinformation. Let's be clear, Mortadela Lima is the masterpiece of intellectual prostitution, a puppet who never gets tired of repeating a pre-written script, defending a rotten government that's been sold out to dictators and terrorists, propping up a failed ideology that should have been buried in the graveyard of history long ago. This isn't journalism, it's barroom activism with expensive makeup. And Globo? Globo Sewer is the perfect stage for this grotesque opera. Want an example of this theater? That indignant little note, showering praise while criticizing the U.S. sanctions imposed on the ministers of the Soviet Supreme Court. The question is simple, are the United States really the ones in the wrong? Or is it that the ones in the wrong are these scoundrels who got sanctioned, who ordered the arrest of a former president while a thief sits in the presidential chair? This is disgusting, a corrupted, discredited institution that reeks before the whole world. Just now, Brazil was defeated in the election for the OAS Human Rights Commission, the Organization of American States. Amid the crisis with the United States, Lula's government backed down and paved the way for the Mexican candidate to take the position, yet another international embarrassment. The Brazilian candidate, Flavio de Saa Silva, received only 3 votes, while the Mexican representative, José Luis Caballero Ochoa, got 23, resulting in Mexico's victory. And you know what the best part of all this is? Seeing these immoral people finally getting a taste of their own medicine. Because where does it hurt? In their vanity. Kids who used to study in the United States, wives who were used to traveling to Miami to shop, now barred as persona non grata. Now that's real shame. They thought they could pose as defenders of democracy while making it onto the global list of human rights violators. Out there, no one covers for them, no way. Their moral filth only goes unpunished here, in this institutional pigsty called Brazil, where a line of suck-ups circles these figures like flies around shit. I want to see how these families are going to deal with this historical stain. I bet they never believed this would happen. It's typical of Brazilian arrogance, fueled by a crude, hypocritical, bought and paid for media that tries to give an air of royalty to a political class that reeks worse than a carcass rotting in the sun. Brazil, my friends, is, painful as it is to admit, a banana republic propped up by fake intellectuals, those so-called scientists from public universities, which are nothing more than job mills, churning out cookie-cutter articles, copy and paste, with zero impact on the real world. Brazil is the biggest untold joke of the century. A joke that's not even funny, because it hurts. Want to pretend to be something you're not? Struts around with cheap arrogance on a mud runway, while sinking into the institutional sewage it helped dig. This country lives to boast about its supposed superiority, but it's all a front, all a fallacy. By the way, speaking of fallacy, that word almost cost me a failing grade in my constitutional law class. I remember it like it was yesterday, the professor turning red with indignation when I said, straight out, that the Brazilian Constitution was a fallacy. Today, If the late and much missed Dr. Roberto Bahia is listening to this, he'd probably agree with me, because he had something that's disappeared from our institutions: character, dignity, and a love for the essence of the law. Professor, please accept my sincere regards, because while you defended constitutionality, these vermin turned the Constitution into an inside joke, a contract of adhesion for scoundrels to rule and for the people to swallow in silence. We like to act like a progressive country with high technology, but we forget about this Brazilian pipe dream. What existed back when I was still studying physics at Mackenzie was scrapped. The only reason we're not at rock bottom is because some private companies set up labs here, taking advantage of cheap labor to develop crumbs, always something aimed at agribusiness or the pharmaceutical industry. Ah, pharmacy. That's the one thing we're never short of. Brazil has become an open-air laboratory, with millions of guinea pigs competing to see who can swallow the next expensive drug the fastest, being forced to take an experimental mRNA injection that didn't even go through proper testing. All of it wrapped up in a crude narrative, sold as salvation. And now the Pfizer files are coming out, exposing everything. My next video on Eater Decoder is going to dive into this cesspool. Stay tuned for the special. Young people with myocarditis, side effects popping up everywhere, and now you can't just call it fake news. The package insert itself is being rewritten to shove the truth they tried to bury, right in the faces of those idiot affirmationists who confuse science with religious dogma. The farce is over. And remember when someone tried to post anything about vaccines during the pandemic? I tried. The result: videos blocked, channels censored, big tech acting as ideological police. It's always like this: when economic interests clash with the truth, they slap on the gag. Here's the reality: Brazil consumes a ton of drugs, both pharmacy meds and street drugs. A country anesthetized, doped up, while the parasites suck it dry to the bone. We need a different social model, a new constituent assembly, something disruptive. But I know that's not going to happen while I'm alive. Even so, I dream of a scientific direct democracy without this bunch of idiot parliamentarians, without central banks dictating our enslavement, without this cancerous financial monopoly. An integrative economy, a constitution based on real equality. But what does the media do? They idolize the guy who builds a tin can car powered by cooking gas as if it were a Brazilian Tesla. They call him Professor Partle, seeing genius in the makeshift solutions born from poverty. That's all that's left to keep up the illusion of national creativity, a circus for fools to applaud. Oh, and for those who don't know, Professor Partle is an old comic book character, and kids these days have no idea what that even is, right? They don't know about Partle or about comic books. But the media keeps recycling this crap for lack of brains. If someone calls me Professor Partle, I'll tell them to shove it up their Bluetooth. Simple as that. Man, what a tough country. A cultural sewer. All right, I never really got into samba, soccer, or carnival, but damn, man, people just don't help. Now we've got this toxic noise they call funk, the so-called pure kind. What kind of nonsense is this pure thing, my friend? And they're going to shove it down our throats 24 hours a day, a kind of mental pollution more lethal than cocaine, a generation hypnotized by stupid show-offs, romanticizing criminals, selling their souls for the latest sneakers, the newest phone, or a little motorbike paid off in 48 installments. It's a society that's doped up, alienated, trading authenticity for status, living in a stereotypical psychotic madhouse, all wrapped up in cheap marketing. Meanwhile, the country keeps sinking in the mud of corruption, ignorance, and collective stupidity. And honestly, I don't have the patience anymore to pretend there's a light at the end of this tunnel. Either the people wake up and tear all this crap down, or they accept the leash and keep licking the boots of those who rape the nation every single day. With Trump lighting the fuse through the Magnitsky Act, the noose has tightened. People are starting to wake up to the failure of Lula's policies, but don't be fooled. This isn't an accident, it's a plan. The Globalists put Lula in the pole position of tyranny and economic destruction, using him as a puppet to speed up the total control agenda. In my view, the plot started even earlier. Temer was the briefing boy in this story, the guy who took the orders and handed over the keys, appointed Zan to the Soviet tribunal to carry out a clear mission, subdue the country, neutralize the opposition, and consolidate a judicial media regime. Since then, Moraes has acted as the local enforcer of a globalist web involving financial elites, billionaire NGOs, and international organizations, all with one goal: to keep Brazil as a banana republic, extract resources, impose ESG, digital control, and deindustrialization. By the way, do you remember that lame letter that Temer forced Bolsonaro to sign? Yeah, because that was really humiliating. I wouldn't have even written that piece of crap. What a shame. Then Zan whacked his ass with it. And do you think it's just a coincidence that generals visit Moraes? Naivety. It's not just about bribes, it's global blackmail, threats of sanctions and persecution, launching investigations on their own, cutting pensions or government positions after retirement from the armed forces, and so on. Moraes has become the Davos wall inside Brazil. The inverted pyramid of power. Today, power in Brazil is an inverted pyramid, with the Supreme Court at the top, crushing the executive, legislative, and armed forces. This didn't just fall from the sky. It started after the return to democracy, sped up during the PT governments, and was consolidated after 2018, when globalism went into hard mode against any populist threat. The armed forces have become the Praetorian Guard of the judiciary, dependent on the budget, tamed by blackmail and the promise of positions. Congress is the house of globalist prostitutes. They sell loyalty for budget amendments, judicial protection, and a cut of billion-dollar contracts with China and international funds. Impeachment of Moraes? Forget it. The Senate is handcuffed by its own cowardice and by the fear of having its dirty laundry aired on the global stage. The media plays its role as the system's watchdog, turning censorship into democracy, destroying reputations, and covering up crises. Who pays the price? You do, with your freedom and your future. It's pay-for-play journalism, where hacks and shills pretend to be impartial while delivering ready-made narratives from the Sao Paulo Forum and Davos, the strings of global control. Every time one string snaps, the globalist elite ties another one. Today, it's digital censorship. Tomorrow, it'll be financial control through digital currencies. If the Magnitsky Act comes into play, it won't be out of love for Brazil, but because of a global power struggle. Trump wants to clip the wings of the globalist agenda, and Moraes is a key piece on this chessboard. That's why the next few weeks could decide the game. But here's the question. How much are these cockroaches willing to pay to keep their tyranny? Live like a king in the Banana Republic or like a baron in a European tax haven? Anyone with assets in Miami thinks twice. That's why we'll see cracks forming. But don't be fooled. When one cockroach falls, another takes the throne. Why don't the people fight back? Because Brazilians suffer from a chronic disease, the illusion of a savior hero. They dream of a messiah who, by the way, was never Bolsonaro, who will cut off heads, bring honesty, and raise the green and yellow flag. That's ridiculous. History proves it. Dictatorships in Brazil have only fallen due to economic collapse and external pressure, not because of popular bravery. The so-called cordial way is the cultural crutch that props up tyranny. And don't kid yourself into thinking that another January 8th is going to solve anything. That was just collective catharsis broadcast live to a numbed nation, with no massive, organized reaction, no clear objective. All that's left for Brazilians is to freak out on social media while sharing patriotic memes with little flags on their profiles. Want to break everything? You'll get hit with rubber bullets. Want to protest peacefully? Congress will just yawn and keep signing million-dollar contracts on the red carpet of corruption. Want to know what the only real way out is? A general strike. Cut off revenue, strangle the state machine until it spits blood, because without money, even the Praetorian Guard deserts. But hold on, don't confuse this with revolution. That word doesn't exist in the Brazilian dictionary. People here are passive, divided, tamed by welfare and soap operas. Forget about a popular uprising. Forget the romantic idea of taking to the streets. This is in Paris in 1789. This is Brazil. And here, my friend, it's hard mode. And before anyone starts with the old tune, the armed forces will save the country. Sit down, that myth has already been destroyed. Their job nowadays is to paint road stripes, act like an NGO in green uniforms, and show up smiling in photos with little kids for the official Instagram. They're not going to save a damn thing. The watermelons, green on the outside, red on the inside, have already picked their side. So, with the illusion exposed, it's clear, if you want a revolution, you'll have to pull off that famous Brazilian workaround. And guess what? I don't even see that happening. The system's Achilles heel is right in front of us. Two factors have the power to kick this rotten machine until it grinds to a halt. First, a collapsing economy, runaway inflation, soaring unemployment, capital flight, the whole package to melt down this cardboard republic. Second, the Magnitsky Act, the American bomb that freezes assets and turns corrupt officials into golden lion tamarins trapped behind the bars of their own luxury. When that blows up, we'll see the whole theater go up in flames. One by one, they'll be hammered until the muck reaches their necks and someone, desperate, shouts, "Enough." Because let's be honest, every corrupt person has a basic fetish. He doesn't just want to steal, he wants to enjoy the stolen money, live the good life, eat prime steak, have an iPhone with champagne, see the Eiffel Tower from a helicopter, stash his ill-gotten cash in a tax haven, buy a mansion in Miami, fly by private jet to Paris. Take Kanja, for example. You can call her whatever you want, but she sure knows how to pick a presidential suite. She picks champagne by the price, my friend, like someone picking out perfume. Now just imagine, all that hard-earned money, stolen with such care, can't pay for these little luxuries anymore. Can you picture Daddy Lula not being able to buy a triplex in Paris? What's he going to stick where? Bury the money in the backyard of the Atabea Ranch? Or spend their whole lives stuck in this pigsty they themselves helped turn into a cattle pen? That's what's going to happen. Vampires from the Plan Alto devouring each other over the spoils while the globalists, cold and cynical, prepare the next trap. I'm betting on the old move, a manufactured green transition designed to screw us even more and impose total control. But sooner or later, my friend, every rat in this machine gets the wake-up call. The day will come when not even that crude cynicism, like "I don't care," will hold up. They'll go into survival mode, because no crooked politician dreams of retiring here, driving around in a bulletproof car and always looking over their shoulder to avoid getting shot. None of them want their kids studying in this pigsty they themselves optimized for looting. They want luxury, status, protection. When that ends, the whole castle will collapse and the stench will reach all the way to hell. Brazil is living under a judicial dictatorship propped up by a globalist conspiracy. And there's no point denying it. It's not an exaggeration, it's political engineering. Moraes is just the visible tip of the iceberg. Beneath him, there's a transnational network manipulating currencies, media, and minds. Impeachment won't come from Congress. Salvation won't come from heroes. Either the people bring the system to a halt, or the system brings the people to a halt. Meanwhile, Trump is sharpening his blade, and maybe it'll be him, not Brasilia, who pulls the first string. You robed worms, have destroyed the future of generations, hijacked freedom, and deserve every sanction. And I hope Europe follows the same path. Because, contrary to the ridiculous narrative they're trying to sell, this isn't sovereignty, it's institutionalized crime. And to wrap up, I ask you, Brazilian, does anyone still believe the speeches of this gang? Or the commentators orbiting this circus, defending monstrosities like the fake news bill, sold as a defense of democracy but which is pure censorship? Tell me in the comments, do you still give this garbage any attention? I want to understand what the point is, because I haven't found any. And it's not just the mainstream media. There are alternative channels that are even more pathetic, like that so-called MB Live TV. It's a show of ignorance, a clueless host, ridiculous guests, pseudo-geopolitical analysts pushing paid narratives. It's almost tragic if it weren't so comical. Shall we watch a bit of this absurdity together? Roll the deep analysis for us, Edu Arthur.
Eduardo Bolsonaro, do you really think those guys are fighting from over there while you're fighting from here? Do you think they're going to get Trump to do something against Alexander de Moraes? Do you really think so, man? That's a lot of wishful thinking. It's really delusional to think that's going to happen. That's not going to happen. Pay attention. That's not going to happen. Trump is not going to pick a fight with the Brazilian Supreme Court because of Alexander de Moraes, because Trump doesn't care. For the United States, the bilateral trade relationship we have is way more important than this petty government squabble.
Other commentators, like Jorge Pontual and Flavia de Oliveira, sound like characters from a badly written script. They push a weak narrative, disconnected from reality, that only fools those who don't look for other sources of information. Anyone who does even a minimal fact check can see how flimsy this argument is. Not even the savvier kids fall for this. It's grotesque. And the worst part, these aren't isolated cases. There's a legion of so-called experts, without any real qualifications, spouting shallow analyses and absurd opinions, sold as if they were absolute truths. Now, let's get to what really matters. We have 513 federal deputies and 81 senators who pretend not to see the obvious. The only institutional path would be the impeachment of Alexander de Moraes. But why don't they do it? Because they know exactly what should be done and, out of convenience, they prefer to look the other way. Brazil, my friends, is already a dictatorship. Get ready. The economy is going to shrink. Companies will keep leaving the country, and ordinary citizens will foot the bill. Lula is nothing more than Zando's puppet, signing off on everything he orders. And don't be fooled. Zandalia has hidden powers. I can't even criticize the society he's part of for fear of serious retaliation. Besides, I have to admit that corruption happens at the highest levels, and most members are deluded by ideas of humanity's advancement, but they can't see what's just a few inches above them. It's a very controlled and sensitive environment. So, despite the international sanctions against him, he keeps doubling down. After all, what criminal stops committing crimes just because they know the police are on their way? And there's more, the tragicomic scene of Geraldo Alckmin, who has already posed for photos alongside terrorists, now trying to negotiate with the White House. It's a guaranteed joke. It's just a circus for show, or better yet, for Brazilians to swallow. Any regular tourist applying for a U.S. visa has their whole life scrutinized, including their social media. Now, tell me, what credibility does a vice president have who shows up smiling at events with dictators? None at all. But these guys live in a bubble. They think dirty politics, full of shady deals, is some kind of universal currency. They're mistaken. These vermin, yes, I can't find a better word, are parasites of society. They operate in a twisted world where corruption is the rule and honesty is the exception. Is there corruption in the United States? Of course, but it's on a whole different level. It's not a system where 90% of public officials depend on shady deals to survive. Here, if Brasilia disappeared from the map, in a matter of days other vermin would sprout from the ground. The reform has to be structural. If there's any chance of rescuing democracy, the number one priority should be auditable voting machines or, if necessary, a new constituent assembly. Wake up, kids. Brazil is biting its nails waiting for the election, believing the same old story that after the results, everything will change. Seriously? What kind of cheap fairy tale is that? Quick question, did it work in Venezuela? They also said over there, hang in there, after the election, everything gets better. And what happened? Blatant fraud, persecution of opponents, widespread repression. No serious country bought into that farce. But of course, Brazil, this circus republic, rushed to endorse it because here, scumbaggery is state policy. Now think with me, you, the Brazilian intellectual who believes in the magical power of the ballot box. The Venezuelan people were dreaming of ousting the dictator Maduro through elections. They put their trust in the ballot box and got what little dignity they had left taken away. So tell me, champ, are the people of Venezuela more spineless than Brazilians? No, my friend, that's not the issue. They don't have weapons. They're submerged in a dictatorship that controls everything: media, army, National Guard, a perfect machine of censorship and repression. And you know what hurts? Seeing a beautiful country with simple, honest, joyful people being crushed by tyranny. It's a spoiler of what's coming if we keep believing in this nonsense about sovereignty. Sovereignty? Give me a break. If anyone still believes in that today, it's because they've already lost any trace of critical thinking and keep watching that garbage Globo channel. And look, sorry for the harshness, but I just can't swallow it in silence anymore. There are a lot of scoundrels in this country, and every criticism I spit out here comes with a bitter taste. Because deep down, I still hold on to the hope that the good part of the population will rise up, tear off the cloak of hypocrisy, drop their stupid pride, and decide to build a way out. Not a political way out, but a human one. Because if we keep going with this collective numbness, tomorrow will just be more of the same: mud, corruption, and oppression, all wrapped up in cheap propaganda for suckers to applaud. The vampires of the Plan Alto are already sharpening their fangs to suck out every last drop of power. They want to burn Zandalili, not for justice, not for morality, but to take the spotlight off themselves and not mess up their own deals. But if they manage to burn Zandalide, who will step aside for some health reason and end up living somewhere in the south or northeast after they fight over the spoils of the position, they'll just put another tyrant on the throne. And if you think taking him down will be easy, wake up, Alice. Zandalide is scheming in the shadows, shielded by the globalist tentacles that just won't let go of this country. Just look at Hillary Clinton's emails about Brazil. An incompetent, corrupt, and sold-out government comes at a price. And the one who pays is you, sucker. Brazil is about to go through an ordeal worthy of purgatory. And this isn't drama, it's a projection. People's lives are going to change, and not for the better. Get ready for months of hardship, years of misery, and a future of institutionalized violence. Now, trying to predict this scenario is like diving into the mud blindfolded. But you can smell it coming. Zando is going to stand up to America. And you want to know the worst part? He's going to do it with a smile on his face, even while screwing over Brazil, because he's got the globalist system covering his back. Venezuela set the example, and Brazil is a key piece on the board for this disgusting elite that dreams of turning the planet into a human cattle ranch. I don't want to get paranoid, but I'm going to be real with you. Trump's move could mean two things. Either the guy really is the last barrier against this scum, which I doubt, or he's part of the same machine and is playing exactly the cards he was told to play. Sanctions sounds noble, right? But in the end, it might just be the final shovel needed to bury the economy for good and turn Brazil into a pit of hunger and chaos. One way or another, the regime isn't going to back down. On the contrary, it's going to double down. And the result? A country that's already hit rock bottom starts digging even deeper. Meanwhile, the people stay numb, waiting for a miracle. Will people wake up? Only when misery comes knocking, violence becomes the soundtrack, and life isn't worth a moldy pastry on the corner. This is the Brazil you defended with your talk of sovereignty. Welcome to hell with Wi-Fi and Pix, both, of course, controlled by the regime. Shameful. We, as a people, have failed to get rid of these parasites. The globalist elites keep trying to export chaos. They manipulate Trudeau, Macron, and other leaders, and they almost managed to turn the United States into the same swamp they force on the rest of the world. Joe Biden and part of the Democratic wing leaving the White House was a relief for America. I hope they don't mess up again with electoral fraud, because sovereignty has to belong to the people, period. Not a corrupted Supreme Court, not oligarchies that drain public resources to maintain a rotten empire. Brazil needs a reality check, and that starts with education and opportunity. Without that, we'll keep serving as a feast for the vampires in power. Now, about the Globalist commentators, honestly, it seems like they skipped school. Childish comments, shallow analysis, no logic. I wouldn't pay to listen. They'd have to pay me. It's shameful. Fortunately, there are channels like Luis, who makes brilliant clips on YouTube and X exposing these gems. Who hasn't laughed at the videos showing Daniela Lima calling the 2022 blockades comongering groups? Or her blunder during the 2023 fake news bill, hinting that the Bible promotes hate? It became a national joke. In 2024, yet another example of her journalism went viral. And now, in 2025, she keeps ignoring scandals like the 90 billion from INSS, which she herself mentioned, but without holding the government, who pays her salary, accountable. If any investor watches this, I ask, is it something to laugh or cry about? Because that's not news. It's propaganda disguised as journalism. And anyone who still believes this narrative needs an urgent wake-up call. This was today's Decoder Talks.